When Theresa Amoon was a little girl, she loved listening to her grandfather tell her local stories in the hills of Lebanon. Amoon began to travel at a very young age and found herself in many different cultures, always surrounded by books, music, and stories. Long story short, she became a storyteller. It is my pleasure to welcome Theresa Amoon to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
And the same.
I said your grandfather was a storyteller, but not perhaps an official storyteller.
No, he was
a talker.
Exactly. He could have done a talk show, perhaps.
Perhaps.
But it was at a time when there weren't any in Lebanon. Anyway, he was someone who indeed loved to take the word, hold the word, they say in Lebanon, and the person who people came to for advice and would speak, sort of the idea of a griot or somebody in the African tradition who helps people communicate.
When did you know there were stories in you that needed to be told?
Oh, from the outset, I read a lot of stories. I was always the person in the theatrical context who was the storyteller, because I was doing theater in which people were sometimes playing music, sometimes telling stories, sometimes acting. So I was always the person they asked to tell the story. And the first story I told was the Ramayana, which was an Indian epic story, because I'd been to India, and I really wanted to tell this story. And so that was 1992. That's when I started telling stories.
Officially telling stories.
The streets are full of stories. And the people I meet, because I'm specialist in personal stories. So the people I meet give me their stories like a gift, you know. I do interviews with people, and they tell me their personal stories. I bring them together and record them and transcribe them and then do a show with people's personal stories. So I'm fascinated about what people have to say in Paris.
You're a good listener. Good storyteller is a good listener.
I hope so.
I hope so. What are the key elements of a great story? Adventure, love, death, romance?
All of the above.
Angst?
Absolutely.
Humor?
Absolutely. All of the above. The way that I think that a story is really important, or that I really follow a story, is that I'm able to see images in my head. That's the thing, is that often we speak from our own experience. And when we imagine in our heads things we've lived through, that way we can tell stories about them. And when I hear these incredible situations that people tell me, and then I say, wow, that's a really good story. And I get to sort of make it shorter, because sometimes people are long, and then distill it down to its essential, and then tell it. And then the person hears their own story. That's a real pleasure.
And when you tell a story, do you use sign language? An East-West story, an Eastern story, do you use sign language? Do you use music?
Interesting.
Your hands?
For some stories, yes. There's, I was in India and learned Indian dance, Kathakali, and I was very impressed by the fact that communication also happened through the hands and the eyes, and not just through the word. But as a storyteller, you want to imagine things and not just look at the storyteller all the time. There was one story that I tell, inspired by Kathakali, with sign language, carrying the word, and little by little words disappear, and the sign language carries.
Is that it's a mudra or a?
Exactly.
It's a mudra.
It's a mudra.
Wow.
Exactly.
So when you go to a story feast, as you will be in Vancouver, and when storytellers get together,
we just...
What do you do?
Well, we talk. We tell stories. We swap. We
swap
have
stories.
A great time. Often. I mean, all the festivals I've been to, and I've been to festivals in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in South America, and in the States. First time in Canada, so it's a real pleasure. And every time it's been such a great experience to exchange not only stories, but cultural things, rhythms, ways of telling, traditional, modern, what is going on in the country as far as storytelling. I was in Colombia. Incredible storytelling in Colombia. So many storytellers in public places. It's absolutely fabulous.
And there's sweet stories, and there's spicy stories, and there's love stories.
All sorts of things. Traditional stories and personal stories, and I often find that they mirror each other. Our human experience is found in traditional stories. We are all on a quest for something, and we have to find
Of
ourselves
course.
with that.
And if you know a story about something, you remember it.
Often.
Do you know what? If somebody just spews out facts, you forget. But if you know the story,
Right. Yeah,
it's really interesting.
Once we get an image, we hold on to it longer.
Nice to meet you.
Real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Theresa Amoon will be at the Story Feast 2008 16th Annual Vancouver International Storytelling Festival.